Welcome back, y'all. Um, Washington D.C. won last month, so here's some news that y'all need to know that's going on in y'all state. Okay, this is titled "The Real Person That Owns Washington State, Washington D.C. He is deceased." Okay, so I'm also the trustee of the United States, so I can look into this. Okay, for y'all. So it's titled "What Happened in Washington D.C. is Happening Around the World." Okay, something regarding him. Okay, let's see. You go by Cass Muddy. Okay, anyway, far right's attempts to storm parliaments and government office have happened in Germany and the Netherlands in recent years. See, be careful, Washington D.C. finna get bombed. Okay, just one day after black women once again protected U.S. democracy in Georgia, white men were attacking the very symbol of that democracy in Washington D.C. The first attack was actually mounted from inside by a group of Republican congressmen who challenged Joe Biden's election victory. This happened every year though, y'all, okay? The second attack started outside as a pro-Trump and stop the steal rally and ended inside with a mob of far-right protesters breaking through the remarkable weak police cordon and illegally entering the U.S. Capitol. Y'all, my grandma made me watch the news with her, okay? That's all she talk about. So this happened every year. Remember that one time it happened? It was so big, y'all. I have been studying the international far right for almost 30 years now and have never seen them as emboldened as in last years. To be clear, this is not just by Donald Trump or the U.S. Just last year, mostly far-right anti-vaccine protesters tried to storm the Reichstag, the German parliament, also facing remarkable weak police resistance. And in the Netherlands, angry farmers, often led by the far-right Farmers Defense Force, have been destroying government offices and threatening politicians since 2019. True. Um, yeah, they really is, but they really destroying the offices in the government, child. Even further back in 2006, far-right mobs stormed the Hungarian state television headquarters and battled the police for weeks in the streets of Budapest. Yeah, that's what I do as well. I got that. When you own your own shit, this what you get, okay? In many ways, the start of the racialization and return to power of current Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. How and why did we get here? First and foremost, through a long process of cowardly failures and short-sighted opportunities of the mainstream rights. Our racializing failed in the wake of the deadly terrorist attack on the Sikh temple in Wisconsin by a longtime prominent neo-Nazi. I wrote the extreme rhetoric that comes from the so-called law-abiding patriots should be taken more seriously. I advise Republican leaders to be more careful in choosing their company and institutions. What happened, however, was the opposite. Far right ideas and people were mainstream rather than ostracized. As in so many other things, Donald Trump has been a major catalyst of the process but not its initiator. True. The radicalization of the U.S. right wing predates Trump by decades. It even predates the Tea Party, which mostly helped to bring the far right into the heart of the Republican Party. Yeah, when y'all see me on the porch drinking my tea, I'm basically the Tea Party guy. But I don't drink tea though, I drink coffee. We mostly helped to bring the far right into the heart of the Republican Party. Obviously, racism and racist dial whistling had been key to the party since they launched the infamous Southern strategy in the 1970s, which brought right Southerners into the Republican Party, but did go far beyond that. The racialization is not just ideological; it is anti-Semitic. In the past decade, right-wing politics and prudence have opportunistically pandered to the far-right electorate by defining them as the real people and declaring this loud minority to be an allegedly victimized silent majority. While this is again a much broader process, it had played out very strongly in the U.S., where it was amplified by a booming conservation media network from talk radio to Fox News. as well as the still vulnerable infatuated of the religious right. It was so successful already before Trump won the presidency. A majority of right evangelicals believe that discrimination against whites is now as critical as demarcation against non-whites. I still don't believe that, but yeah. A year later, a poll found that a majority of white evangelicals believe they are more discriminated than Muslims in the U.S. It is high time journalists, I still don't agree. It is high time journalists politically and pundits see the far right for what it is, a threat to liberal democracy. The discourse of white victimhood is no longer a purely right-wing phenomenon. However, whenever far-right successes take mainstream media and politics by surprise, they overcompensate and go from denouncing or ignoring the racists to defending or even exalting them. For years now, journalists and politicians have been minimizing the importance of racism and pushing the narrative of economic anxiety. Racists become the left behind or simply the people, even in the countries where the far right barely polled about 10% of the national vote. Undoubtedly, some right-wing politicians and pundits really believe their own propaganda, but the vast majority knows very well that the far-right electorate constitutes only a minority of the population, and that's white people. Whether evident or not, do not face anywhere near as much discrimination as Muslims or other non-white and non-Christian groups. If they don't believe it, then ask them this question. Do you really think the protesters would have made it into the Capitol if they had been African American or Muslims? Most politicians and pundits probably initially pandered to these groups for opportunist reasons, hoping to win far-right support. But as the far-right got more and more emboldened and violent, the mainstream right became more and more afraid. Many mainstream politicians and other elites no longer dare to speak out against the far right, afraid to be personally and politically threatened by their mob. True though. The increasingly bold and open political violence or far-right gangs and mobs should be a wake-up call to all enablers of and peddlers to the far right. You don't control them, they control you. And while these gangs don't represent the broader part of the population that holds far-right views or supports far-right candidates and parties, fundamentally they share a similar worldview. And in this view, there is no space for nuance or compromise. You are either an ally on their terms or an enemy. True. And there is no mercy for enemies, not even for former allies. Just as Georgia Governor Brian Kemp or Brad Wassenberger, the Secretary of State. I'm hearing no. Okay? It is therefore high time that liberal democratic journalists, politicians, and pundits finally see the far right for what it is, a threat to liberal democracy. A formidable threat for sure, but also a threat can only succeed with the tacit help of the mainstream, either by opportunistic correlation or by cowardly non-responses. We are not in the 1930s. Today, the vast majority of Americans and Europeans support liberal democracy, but they have become the silent majority, increasingly ignored and unprotected by representatives. It is time to stand up for the far right and for liberal democracy. It is time to call out the racism and undemocratic discourses and behaviors of the far right. And it's time to clearly and openly reject the toxic narrative of white victimhood. Of course, we should acknowledge the struggle of parts of the white population, notable the farmers and workers, but not at the expense of the non-white population of the liberal democracy. True? Ain't no white farmers. But anyway, this article was amended on 7-8 January 2020. A reference to a phrase being shouted by protesters was removed due to the phrase not being entirely clear in the relevant footage. And it was the headquarters, see, that when they started it, January 2020, I told you. But they killed Kid in May now, but they still started all this to change the rules in January. Okay, a reference to a phrase being shouted by protesters was removed due to the phrase not being entirely clear in the relevant footage. and it was the headquarters of Hungarian state television that protesters stormed in 2006, rather than the Hungarian parliament as an earlier version started. Um, I hope you appreciate this article because you moved on. I wanted to ask if you would consider supporting the Guardian journalists as we enter one of the most consequential news cycles of our lifetimes in 2024. With the potential of another Trump presidency looming, there are countless angles to cover around the year's election, and we'll be there to shed light on each new development with explainers, key takeaways, and analysis of what it means for America, democracy, and the world. A small number of billionaire owners have a powerful hold on so much of the information that reaches the public about what's happening in the world. The Guardian is different. We have no billionaire owners or shareholders to consider. Our journalist is produced to serve the public interest, not profit motives. Okay, I don't profit motives. Thank you. And we avoid the crap that befalls much U.S. media. The Tennessee born of a desire. Okay. So yeah, y'all, that basically what they want me to show y'all. Okay. So enjoy. Thank you.